Well, here I am at Liverpool Bahai Centre with Carlo Schroder. We're going to go in and look at the centre, and we're going to chat to you about the Bahai. Join us on Faith Matters. Hello and welcome to Faith Matters with me, Keith Hitchman. This is the show where we take a spiritual perspective on Merseyside life, and I'm here at the Liverpool Bahai Centre in Wavertree with Carlo Schroder.
That's right.
Who is a representative of the Bahai, and it's been great to be with you, Carlo. And do tell us, what is the Bahai? I'm not sure many of our viewers really know.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, welcome to the Bahai Centre. Not every town in the UK has a Bahai Centre, but we're in Liverpool lucky enough we have one. The Bahai faith is the youngest of the world religions, and the name comes from its founder Baha'u'llah, who originated from Iran. So that's just in a nutshell what the Bahai faith stands for, or what it is. Yeah.
Okay, and what are your beliefs?
Bahai believe that it's quite interesting to summarize a whole religion in beliefs, but if I had to summarize the Bahai faith, I would say these things. Baha'is believe in unity as a main principle, and that unity is that there is only one God, that there is only one religion, and that there's only one human race. But when we unpick that a little bit more, then I would also say that Baha'is believe essentially in the life of the Spirit. So we believe in God. We believe that God created us out of love, and that as human beings we have that spiritual nature, of course, which comes from God. Then we see that that God would not leave us alone. He's always with us, and He sends these special beings. Sometimes you might call them prophets. Others call them messengers. Baha'is like to refer to them as manifestations of God, and they're like a perfect mirror that reflects the sun, which is God, and in that mirror we can see the sun, and in a given time period a new manifestation of God appears. And
so one at a time, as it were?
One at a time. So when we look at these manifestations, just to give you some names, let's say we have Abraham, Moses, Jesus, or the Buddha or Krishna as well. So we see that all these various faiths we see today are actually part of a progressive revelation where God speaks to us through these great teachers, manifestations of God, prophets, whatever name you want to describe them with. And they appear at a given age and given time and teach mankind lessons that are important for this day and age. And we believe that Baha'u'llah is the latest of these great teachers, these manifestations of God, and the essential teachings of Baha'u'llah evolves all around unity of the world and the principles around unity in diversity. So, and I say diversity because unity can only be truly come about if we have unity in diversity. And there's a little quote from the Bahai faith that in the Bahai writings it says that that which the Lord has ordained as the most mightiest instrument for the healing of the world is the union of all its people in one universal cause, one common faith. And that encapsulates that belief that we need to bring people together.
Okay, and your founder no longer with us in his earthly life?
In his earthly life, no. So Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Bahai faith, was born in 1817, on the 12th of November 1817, and he was the son of a nobleman, of a minister of the king of Persia. And when his father passed away, he was in his early 20s, Baha'u'llah was given the opportunity to become a minister himself, but he chose to live a life of giving to the poor. As he said, he didn't want to have a political life. He wanted to pray and give to the poor, and he became known as the father of the poor in his hometown near Tehran, in what is now Iran. And he had a lot of suffering, and I think that is the story that Baha'u'llah tells about all the prophets, that he went through, for his beliefs, he was put in prison, then exiled from Iran first to Baghdad in what is now Iraq, then to Turkey, and eventually he ended up as a prisoner in the city of Akka, which is in North Israel, where he remained there as a prisoner for the rest of his life. And to us as Baha'is, we believe that Baha'u'llah suffered these 40 years of imprisonment so that mankind can be released from its shackles. So it's that his suffering was something important to us as Baha'is, and that he did that so that the world can be transformed. And then he passed away physically in 1892, and that is now where Baha'is would, when we pray, we actually pray in that direction once to three times a day. We actually turn to the direction of Akka to pray where Baha'u'llah is being buried. But of course, in some ways, Baha'u'llah as a spirit is not dead. Because if the true life is the life of the spirit, which I mentioned earlier on, that life begins in this world in the womb of the mother, but then once the body dies, the soul continues its way to God.
Okay, and is there a manifestation alive today of the Godhead, of the divine spirit, do you think?
No, so it's quite. So what Baha'u'llah said is that these manifestations appear from time to time in certain ages.
It's not a continuous thing.
It's not quite a continuous thing. It is an eternal thing, but we expect the next manifestation of God to appear in at least 1,000 years from now, or maybe even later than that. So that's a promise of Baha'u'llah. And when we look at the history of how does Baha'u'llah relate to, in some ways, to other faiths, is that Baha'is believe that there was always a promise in all faiths, that each faith would make a promise that someone would come to renew that faith, to bring more, another message from God to mankind or to humanity. And at the moment, for us, this is Baha'u'llah, but in over 1,000 years, we would expect the next one to come. In the meantime, Baha'is just have Baha'u'llah appointed his son as the interpreter of his writings, Abdul Baha, who Baha'is see as a perfect example of how to be a Baha'i. And then it's now given to the hands of the Baha'is to govern themselves within their structure.
So when you meet together, am I right in saying that you incorporate writings from varied varied religious traditions? Or do you have your own writings, your own scriptures?
We do have our own writings and scriptures. We have the most holy book to Baha'is is called, it's an Arabic name, Kitab-i-Aqdas, which means the most holy book, which has a lot of the Baha'i laws in it. But then there are estimated over 100 volumes that Baha'u'llah wrote. So Baha'u'llah, we believe that as Kof, this was his revelation from God. So God revealed through Baha'u'llah, like a hollow reed. So in Baha'u'llah, the writings were written down. And so we see those writings of Baha'u'llah as the very word of God, which is another Baha'i belief, an important Baha'i belief. And so there are many books, but the most important one is the Kitab-i-Aqdas. Then there's a book called the Kitab-i-Iran, which is the book of certitude. Baha'u'llah revealed the writings in Arabic and in Farsi, as he was Persian origin. And then they got translated in nearly all the languages that there are. So
what exactly do you do when you meet together?
There are different types of meetings. So let's describe one of the meetings which is part of the Baha'i calendar, the 19-day feast, which is very core to a community that has got more than 9 Baha'is. And we come together as Baha'is every 19 days, which is based on the Baha'i calendar, where we have got 19 months, which 19 days, and at the first day of each month we come together, we share prayers from the Baha'i writings in that instance, we consult about the community affairs, and then we share some food, some refreshment together. So there's a spiritual side to it, a consultation side, and then a social side as well. But then saying that, there are many other meetings and activities that Baha'is do. So it's very important for Baha'is to study the Word of God, so the Baha'i writings together. So we have groups of study circles where we learn the writings together, where we develop skills of how to serve our community and our fellow man. We have got classes for children to bring a moral education forward, classes for youth, and then devotional gatherings where actually, as you rightly pointed out, where we leave it quite open, where we say, well, if the true life is the life of the Spirit, then one service element that we can do is to simply share that spiritual life with others. And that means that those devotional gatherings can take various shapes.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop you there because we're going now to our commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk a bit about your personal story and then delve more into the Baha'i faith. So join us after the break for Faith Matters. Welcome back to Faith Matters with me, Keith Hitchman. I'm at the Bahai Centre in Wavertree in Liverpool with Carlo Schroder. We're talking about the Baha'i faith. So Carlo, just want to talk about your story really. You're German, you grew up in East Germany. Were you born into a Baha'i family? How did you get involved with this faith tradition?
It's an interesting story because you have to imagine that East Germany as a country was actually very atheist, and the communist regime was not interested in religion at all. So when I was 4 or so, I asked, my mom told us she believed in God. So my sister and I said, okay, we believe in God too. When I was 6, I asked a question about Jesus. So my mom said to me, why don't you go to the Christian lessons in the local church where a priest had come to the village, and some mothers just felt they wanted more religious education for their children rather than the communist style alone. And then my mother, when I was 10, discovered this Baha'i faith just before the unification of Germany. And so she was actually one of the first East German Baha'is in the country. And she talked to me about the Baha'i faith. And what attracted me was this idea of the unity of religion, that all religion are essentially from the same divine source. We don't quite know what that source looks like exactly. It's, God is unknowable in this essence. But I liked that explanation that all these religions are from God. And when I was thinking, where do the 1 billion Muslims, okay, it was there were less Muslims at the time, population has grown since, but at the time, as a 10, 11, 13-year-old, you do think, so where do all these different religions fit in? Can it be that one is true, the other one is false? And I really like the message that they're all from the same God, and I enjoyed reading the Baha'i writings as well. And that were the sort of things that got me involved in the Baha'i faith. Another really important aspect was that my mom told me, as a Baha'i, we have to investigate the truth independently. So you're not going to be a Baha'i because your parents are a Baha'i. So when I was 17, I made that conscious decision. I could have made that decision with 15, which is the age of maturity, but I waited for another 2 years and I thought about it. How would I be as a Baha'i? I have to try to live to those Baha'i standards, and I realized you will always end up trying to live to the Baha'i standards. Like every other religious person, you always try to be a good person to the best of your abilities. And then when I was 17, I made that decision to be a Baha'i and to commit to the various practices that we do, the daily prayers and fasting once a year and attending 19-day feasts that we spoke of earlier.
So I want to ask you the question, how does the Baha'i relate specifically to the Christian faith? What is your take on Jesus as a person? And what did your founder and your leaders, what's their perspective on Jesus?
Yeah, very important. So I would describe myself, as I often say to my Christian friends, as a lover of Jesus. I feel that because I was brought up with the church, and I feel I've never left Jesus because I I see Baha'u'llah, I alluded this to earlier in the interview where we talked about that to Baha'is, Baha'u'llah is a fulfillment of promises of previous religions. So to a Baha'i, the way we view the Baha'u'llah is that Baha'u'llah is that return of Jesus that is promised in the Bible, in the glory of the Father. And to us, that is what Baha'u'llah resembles. And to me, Baha'u'llah warns us that we should not make any distinction between these prophets or manifestations of God. So when I look at Jesus or Baha'u'llah, I see them, they're all on this unique level. They're all in manifestations of God that are there to teach mankind. And they're all part of, if you use a school analogy, they're all these teachers. They're teaching a curriculum from God, who has got the master plan. And just because one teacher has a curriculum to teach the ABC and another teacher has got the calculus, doesn't say anything about the teachers. It purely means that the audience at the time 2,000 years ago wasn't quite ready for the same information, the same lesson plan that we needed for this day and age. And therefore, maybe Baha'u'llah's teachings go into more detail, specifically around the unity of the world, of how we can achieve that. What are the steps? That's the concern of the Baha'i faith. Where maybe, I'm not, maybe the emphasis, what I took away from Jesus was that to love thy neighbor. And obviously it's so rich. There's so much that the Baha'i faith will build on the messages of Christianity. So to us, all these previous religions, a little bit like a Christian maybe see the Old Testament, would build on what was previously. The Baha'i faith wouldn't be here today if those previous religions, including Christianity, wouldn't have been there in the first place.
Okay, what about Islam? Because you said that Baha'u'llah was from Iran originally, Persia. Originally, he suffered. I assume he must have suffered under an Islamic kind of regime, and within an Islamic culture. How do you relate to Islam in the contemporary setting?
The easiest way for me to explain it, I think, is to look at that. Each time you have a mother religion and then a prophet comes out. So in Hinduism, you have a Buddha that emerges out of Hinduism. So you've got Buddhism, Hinduism. And maybe another example of that is the Baha'i faith and Islam and Christianity and Judaism. So in some ways, you could compare it, if you like. Just like Jesus was brought up as a Jew, Baha'u'llah was brought up as a Muslim. And like Jesus, he found that the very people that he originated from were the ones that rejected him initially. And of course, some of them became Baha'is, but there was, as the governments of the day were afraid of these new movements, and they saw this as a political issue and tried to imprison Baha'u'llah. Many Baha'is were killed and persecuted, even until today, of course. So that is our relationship, really. It's comparable to that we believe that Prophet Muhammad was a prophet from God, while we believe that the acts of the followers of Prophet Muhammad, to Baha'is, were the acts that were human-inspired rather than the core message of the faith when it originated. And so Baha'i would always look at the origins of those early beliefs rather than at the man-made things that maybe come about a few thousand years later.
Okay, you've got a great emphasis on world peace. I know that. Very basic question, simple answer if you can give one. Is world peace achievable?
Yes, world peace is achievable, is inevitable. I believe that I'm, as a person, as a Baha'i, and as a person, as a human being, I'm contributing to an ever advancing civilization. Once upon a time, we had tribes, little tribes. We then developed into city-states. We got into nation-states, and at the moment we are in our puberty. Humanity is in puberty. Our body is quite strong. We have a lot of power now. Just the mind now needs to catch up and become more mature to deal with this newfound power that we can now connect the whole world. And so, to me, as Baha'u'llah says that the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. And to me that means that we have to keep on working at that unity. Throughout centuries we've seen an ever greater level of unity throughout the world. We are heading there, but if we work with our neighbors, with everybody, with their little contributions they can make, to slowly shape a world that becomes comes more and more together, less painfully, because that growing together, that globalization, can also be painful because it's a growing pain.
Okay, so very briefly, kind of, your founder's son actually landed in Liverpool at some point and spoke to the Theosophical Society here. Is that right?
That's right. He
When was that?
That was in 1912, and he spoke in Liverpool to the Theosophists, to the Unitarian, I believe, as well. And his message at the time was very simple: to keep on warning people about what could happen in Europe, for instance. He actually foretold the First World War, and he said to them to all these principles. He shared principles of the equality of men and women, which is important for Baha'is, so that society cannot fly as a bird if you have got two unequal wings. They have to be equally strong. The importance of science and religions, that are two knowledge systems that go hand in hand with each other.
Great. I'm going to have to draw it to a close now. As always, we could talk on for longer. Maybe we should have a longer program. I don't know, on Faith Matters. But people can get in touch with you here in Wavertree at the Bahai Centre.
Yes, they can.
Join you here. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Thank you for viewing, and join us next time on Faith Matters. Well, here we are back in the studio at Bay TV, the place where Faith Matters began in November 2014. This is the very last episode. Many thanks for watching, and a special thanks to all the team that produced it. A big thank you to all the faith communities across Merseyside for their contribution to the show, and many thanks to God, the reason why faith matters.